Good morning, good afternoon, Excellencies and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Oliver Chinganya. I am the Director at the Africa Center for Statistics, and I'll moderate this session. So on behalf of the Ms. Vera Songwe, the United Nations Under-Secretary General and the Executive Secretary of ECA, let me welcome you honorable members, parliamentarians, distinguished representatives of the UN system, international organizations, the private sector, the civil society, and stakeholders that are part of this session this afternoon. I also want to pay sincere gratitude really to our partners, Portulans Institute, with whom is jointly organizing this session. At this juncture, let me recognize the presence of our panelists. We have joined with Dr. Vera Songwe, as I mentioned, our Executive Secretary of ECA. We have His Excellency Hammoud Toure, Minister of Digital Economy of Mali, and also former UN Under-Secretary General and Secretary General of the International Telecommunications Union. We have Her Excellency Sina Lawson, the Minister of Digital Economy and Telecommunication in Togo, who is also a member of the ECA Digital Center of Excellence. We have also Honorable Hagi Bo, Member of Parliament from Gambia, and is also part of the Pan-African Parliament. We have from our partners, Dr. Bruno Lanvin, who is the co-founder and director of Portulans Institute. We have Mr. Ni Naku Kweven, chair of the Ghana.com. We have Ms. Rebecca Endo-George, the chief executive secretary of App Techniques and also board member of the ECA Digital Center of Excellence. And finally, not the least, is Ms. Magdalene Chipumoi, Chief Executive of Hello Hub in Kenya. Now, digital technologies have demonstrated their critical role in ensuring real-time transferring and sharing of information and in aiding decision-making at the minimum cost during the COVID pandemic. They have played a crucial role in keeping society functioning, whether by enabling remote working, automating processes, or facilitating contactless transaction. The increased use of digital technology has also brought society closer to developing a smart economy, which promises new ways of business to grow and to be more productive. It is estimated the use of digital technology has increased between 20 to 40% in Africa. In fact, mobile money such as M-Pesa in Kenya has increased to the record of 1 million mobile users during this period. COVID has stimulated innovation, creativity across the continent, showing the continent's potential towards accelerating industrial development, including homegrown technologies. Governments therefore need to accelerate these developments by placing digital at the core of post-19 recovery. However, Africa continues to trail behind other regions, especially when it comes to access, affordability, and usage of ICTs. To this end, ECA, in collaboration with the Portulans Institute, is organizing this session to discuss Africa region's progress in the network readiness and key policy areas that African countries should consider harnessing digital technologies and innovation for sustainable recovery from the COVID pandemic. This session will also provide an opportunity to discuss on the methodology for ranking countries in the Network Readiness Index for 2020. I'm hopeful that today's discussion will offer new and valuable perspective addressing the immense challenges we face as we continue to work together towards a prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable future for Africa. So without further ado with that introduction, I would like now to call upon Dr. Vera Songwe, the Undersecretary and Executive Secretary of ECA, to give her thoughts on today's session. Executive Secretary, please go ahead with your remarks.
So good morning, everybody, and really a pleasure to see all of you from all the different parts of the continent and of the globe, actually, because I think some people are joining from the United States very early in the morning. Listen, it is a really great pleasure for me and for ECA to be joining this launch with Portulans of the index. I think it has taken a lot of time to get here. And the African Network Readiness Index of 2020 is being organized under the theme Leveraging Digital Transformation in the Post-COVID-19 Era, the State of African Economies. It's no better theme, as we all know. We have been saying so far, the importance of digital technology. If ever there was a doubt about digital technology, I think COVID-19 has demonstrated that this is, the sign of the times, and we all need to get on board with it. The purpose of this meeting, dear panelists and everybody else who is listening to us, is to discuss Africa's region, the African region's progress in network readiness and digital transformation. We do talk a lot about the fact that all of the African countries and African populations have cell phones, but I think we do need to go beyond the conversation on cell phones because it's very limiting, and actually it's a fallacy to really looking at how connected is Africa, and that is what the Portulans Institute is about to do or is doing. And we're hoping that with the partnership with ECA, we can do more, both in terms of providing some more data, but also doing a little bit more advocacy about what needs to be done to improve it, because it's one thing to talk about where we are, it's another thing to take us from where we are to where we really want to get to. Digital technologies have immense potential to transform economic and social interactions and are opening up new possibilities for increased transparency, accountability, citizen participation in policymaking and service provision. It's been projected that the economic size of the digital economy in the world will increase by 25% by 2025. However, various studies consistently show that the majority of digitization benefits flow to traditional businesses, reinforcing the importance for traditional brick and mortar companies to embrace digitization, improve competitiveness, and build recovery and resilience. I'm hearing something coming back to me. I don't know if everybody is hearing that or it's just me. Maybe we want to go on mute if we're not speaking, so we don't, our voices are not coming back. The Network Readiness Report, NRI 2020, that we're launching today in collaboration with the Portulans Institute, assesses how countries are ready to leverage information technologies to be ready for the future. The NRI report asserts a truly planetary digital transformation will be one that strives to end poverty and inequality, tackle climate change and environmental degradation, and strive for peace and justice, and hopefully also help us to respond to some of our health crises. I must say that very recently I was going through the airport in Togo, the country of Madame Sina, and I think that what they have put in place to manage the COVID crisis and the technology that is being used to sort of check your COVID test and whether you've done it and how you do it before you do. I was just transiting, so Sina, that's why you didn't see me, but I came through your airport. But I must say that because of technology, one is able to do some of these things to ensure the safety of our economies, of our people, but then ensure that the economies can take on. And that is why we're here today. It really is about how we bring back the global economy post the COVID-19. The NRI report advances digital transformation and puts in place, I think, a framework that will help us look at issues of cost, democratize access, encourage growth of new renewable products and their markets. Clearly, Africa's green recovery is grounded in the adoption also of new technologies that can accelerate the attainment of the SDGs. Digital technologies are key to accelerating the achievement of the SDGs. We all know that. For instance, today, more than 80% of the continent is covered by mobile money services. Fintech services have become a powerful lever for growth, particularly again in the COVID-19 era. But more importantly, as Africa looks to launching the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, we're hoping that a woman from Algeria will be able to trade with another one from Zimbabwe without meeting each other, but because financial services and fintech and logistics allow us to do all the pre-logistics trading that is needed for that to happen. Though important progress is being made, Africa continues to trail behind on other regions, especially when it comes to access, affordability, and usage of ICT. Africa is the region with the lowest internet usage in the world, with only 28.2% penetration out of 87% of individuals online globally, and 34% have access to broadband connectivity. So I want us to remember these numbers. We only have 28.2% penetration, and only 34% have access to broadband connectivity. And it's not because they have access that they can actually use it, because it's quite expensive. So the speed of access and bandwidth usage compared to other regions is the lowest. The average cost of internet is a significant barrier to internet access. In Africa, for instance, 1 gigabyte of data costs about 7.12% of one's average income on the continent. So that's a lot, with some countries having rates as high as 20%, which is way above the 1-2% deemed to be affordable. Other barriers to internet use in the region are data protection, cost of handsets, and lack of digital skills and literacy. We want Africa to be part of today's networked world. To ensure the continent bridges the ICT access and affordability gap, the main questions that the report is looking at and that we collectively have to be finding answers to. And we do have some bright examples on the continent. I don't want us, as we talk about this, to get the impression that all of Africa is at the same speed. And I think this is the benefit of some of these conversations, is that countries, of course, like Togo and Kenya and Senegal and Rwanda and Morocco, Tunisia to some extent, are doing quite well. And so we can look within the continent to see what more can be done, what needs to be done better, and how we can go forward with the questions that we're asking ourselves. Are we using technology to expand, increase to access to basic services? Are we leveraging opportunities of digital technology to create employment for the youth? We know that before the crisis, we had to create 13 million jobs for our youth every year. Now with the crisis, we've lost a lot of jobs. So that number is going up to somewhere between 16 and 20 million jobs a year. We cannot do that if we don't improve our network connectivity and leverage technology. And then of course, there's the question of cost and bringing in the private sector, crowding in the private sector to help us deliver. ECA has been working a lot in this area. That's why we're here today with Portulans Institute to tackle these challenges. Of course, we have the Center of Excellence on Digital ID, digital trade and digital economy that provides support to member states on launching and working, for example, with the government of Ethiopia on their digital strategy, working with Togo, working with Kenya, working with Rwanda, working with Cameroon to just see, what is it in their strategies that we can work with to improve either information, data protections, and just ensure digital ID, of course, is a particularly important component of that. ECA, in collaboration with the African Union Commission and other partners, has developed a comprehensive African digital transformation strategy to enable member states to fully benefit from the fourth industrial revolution and facilitate the CFTA implementation. ECA is now hoping that once, because we've now done the strategy, we should go into implementation. What should we do? How should we do it? Looking at issues of broadband, improving and accelerating broadband speeds, working on issues of cybersecurity, issues of digital ID. With COVID and with all the resources that are being put into the continent, it's a big and huge conversation around governance. Civil society is asking for better transparency in the use of resources. So we're working to see if we can use technology to increase and improve the transparency of the use of resources. And then of course, payments, payment systems. EC is supporting many African countries to work on these different platforms and to see where we go forward with this. In conclusion, first of all, I want to again thank everybody who is on the panel with us today. It's a much broader family that is working on the issues of digital technology, ICT connectivity on the continent. We continue to hope that we work together because we know collectively that as we do this, UNICEF, for example, we're working with UNICEF to see whether we can put and accelerate the digital connectivity for every primary school on the continent. It's a huge, huge effort, working with the African Development Bank, working with the World Bank, of course. So working, of course, with Smart Africa and many of the other institutions on the continent to just make sure we need to bring more private sector in. And we have some private sector on the panel today to see how collectively, the sum of our efforts really does make this change happen and happen fast. So our collaboration with Portulans is just an addition to this conversation. And we hope that through future studies, we can begin to shed more light on where are the areas where we need to do more and continue to do more advocacy so that the continent, maybe next time when we have this conversation, is not trailing behind in everything. We have made some progress in a few. Once again, I thank you very much for listening. I thank Portulans Institute for this new index, which hopefully will help countries. I believe that what you measure, you can change. So hopefully as we start measuring, we will begin to change and change for the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary, for those insights. I think sets the tone for the session. And you pointed out at some of the areas that we need to concentrate, and also that it's not as bad. There are countries that are doing well on the continent, but overall, I think we need to push to make sure that everyone is connected. So with that, I'm going to ask Bruno to just give us the presentation on the index itself. Bruno, could you just run us through the presentation? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Thank you very much, Madam Executive Secretary, for those stimulating introductory remarks and very fact-based statements. Let me try and share my screen now. Can everybody see the first slide?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. So as mentioned briefly before, Madam Executive Secretary, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to present the results of the 2020 edition of the Network Readiness Index, with here today a special focus on Africa. Since 19 October, we had a round of successful events co-organized with our partners, in particular UNESCO and STL. But this one today is different and special. We have a different format, and we want to have a focus on Africa, which is geared to what UNECA is doing in the region and what member countries are doing. Let me give a spoiler right away. The statement I'm going to deliver today is an optimistic one. So, of course, there are some elements that need to be addressed about digital divide, about Africa lagging behind other regions. But as mentioned before, there are so many reasons to be optimistic that our discussion today should enable us to highlight as much as we can the positives and chart the way ahead. So without further ado, and trying to keep within the time allocated for this presentation, because the most interesting part will be in the discussion that will follow. Let me try to give you an overview of both the rationale and the results of NRI 2020. So I will go very quickly across 5 points, which are now in front of you. I will be very quick. So if there is any question, I'll be ready to answer them in the following discussion, but I want to focus on some key elements right now. So starting with the first one, what is NRI? I would say very briefly that NRI has actually existed for practically 20 years now. It is something that we have produced with the World Economic Forum for almost 2 decades. And 2 years ago, the governance of NRI moved from the World Economic Forum to Portulans Institute. That gave us the opportunity to actually rejuvenate the index and to bring it closer to what we consider is the core of future readiness, that is a human-centric approach to ICTs. Let me explain briefly what that means, moving to the model that we use in NRI. The model is what we call a composite model. It tries to take a holistic view of technology. In other words, it relies on 4 pillars, and technology is only one of them. Clearly a very important one, but only one of them. We want the index to focus on people impact, on governance, and on impact on society and economy as a whole. And for that, we use about 60 indicators. What the press and the media take every year out of the report, what makes the headlines, is the rankings. So let me say a brief word about the top ranking countries this year. We see basically, and that's the first message emanating from the data, that the rich countries are very solid leaders. We have Sweden, Denmark, and Singapore at the very top, but there's also a second lesson that emerges immediately from looking at the leaders, which is that you don't need to be a very big economy to be network ready. The leaders there are typically countries of a few million people, which is much less than many African countries. So that's already an inspiring lesson to be used from the Network Readiness Index. But if we go a bit deeper and take the global view, and let me explain very briefly what we call the bubble chart is about. On the horizontal axis, you have basically the wealth of countries, GDP per capita. So if you're to the right of this diagram, you're a rich country. If you're to the left, you're a poor country. And the vertical axis is about network readiness performance. So the leaders are at the top of the diagram and the laggards at the bottom. With not much surprise, we see that Africa, most African countries, can be found in the red rectangle. Most of the poorer countries can be found in sub-Saharan Africa, and this is also where we see some of the lowest performance in terms of Network Readiness Index. And this is totally consistent with the overall global picture, where you see this black line crossing the diagram. That is the regression line. In other words, for any given GDP per capita, the black line indicates where the expected performance of a country should be. And the good news, because there are good news everywhere, is that in Africa, as in other parts of the world, we see a number of countries above this regression line. It is the case in particular for the two big bubbles, the blue one and the orange one. The blue one is India, and the orange one is China, the size of the bubbles being proportional to the size of the population of individual countries. And what this tells us is that action is in the middle. What is happening at the worldwide level in terms of network readiness is very much happening in middle-income countries. And that's also a message that has important positive consequences for the African continent. I will come back to that in a minute. So we need to go deeper than just these global figures. We can go deeper by looking at each of the four pillars of the model, see who are the champions in technology, in people, in governance, and in impact. And I would just, there are many remarks that come from such an analysis, but I will just flag one here, which is that if you look at who are the leaders in these four pillars, you don't see Sweden there. Sweden is not the number one in any of these four pillars. Yet Sweden is the global leader for network readiness. What does this mean? It means that it is more important to have good performance across all pillars, that is to have a system-wide approach to network readiness, than to focus on one particular pillar. And again, this has important policy and strategic consequences, which we may discuss later. A second way of looking at this global data is to look at income groups, because obviously, if you are a low-income country, you don't have the same possibilities to move up the ladder of network readiness as if you were a rich country. And what we see looking in particular at the low-income countries is that the champion is an African country. It is Rwanda, a country that has been mentioned already by Dr. Songwe. So we have good examples to build on in any kind of context. What is striking also is, if you look at the second column, upper middle income countries, we see Malaysia and China at the top there. That is two Asian countries, which also tells us something about how ready the Asian region is getting towards the future challenges. Moving now to what is the core of this presentation, the focus on Africa. And before we hear it from our panelists, let me just flag a few elements here. One of them is that, of course, from a statistical point of view, Africa is trailing compared to other regions. If we look at the three champions in Africa for the NRI 2020, they are Mauritius, South Africa, and Kenya. However, Mauritius, the top-ranking African country, is only 61, which is hardly above the middle of the ranking. What we see also is that Africa is one of the continents on which we have the largest discrepancy between the leaders and the laggards. This is described in the following slide, where we can see that between Mauritius 61st and Chad 134th, there are 73 ranks, which is very, very large. So there is also room for regional cooperation, for exchanges of experiences, and for sharing resources in Africa. A second message we get by looking at the pillar performance of African countries is that there are positive signs. We see, for instance, that the pillar on which Africa is generally doing better is governance, which is good news because governance is what you develop even if you don't have the resources or the investment necessary to improve in the short term at least your infrastructure and provide affordable access to a majority of your population to ICT and networks. Many countries that have the resources still have poor governance, whether we consider the regulatory environment, whether we consider the way in which public procurement is organized, etc. The good news is that in Africa, these elements are roughly in place. Of course, it can always be improved, but it means that if the money comes, there's a chance it will be properly used. The weaknesses remain, as Madam Executive Secretary mentioned already, in access and usage of ICTs and in affordability. These are two areas in which more improvement can be expected in the years to come. If you look at the regions within the African continent, there's one element that is valid across all the continent, which is that better data will help us track improvements. And the example of Togo is clearly one remarkable in that area, because we know for a fact, and Madam Executive Secretary just mentioned it again, that there are very good things happening in Togo. Yet Togo is not included in the rankings because of a lack of available data. So this is something that has is not related to ICT improvements. It is related to improvement in the statistical apparatus. It is not necessarily something that requires a lot of financial resources. And from our point of view, at least, for us who track to measure the good things happening, it is worth investing into. Looking at the different parts of the continent, in Eastern Africa, we see that trust, regulation, inclusion, and the economy generally are all showing encouraging signs. The ICT usage in Kenyan government and the ICT impact on the Ethiopian economy are just two elements outstanding in that area. In Middle Africa, we see lots of room for improvement for Cameroon, Angola, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Chad, just stemming from the data. And if we look at Southern Africa and Western Africa, respectively, we see that in terms of relationship with the SDG indicators, we have very good examples in Southern Africa. And the presence on social networks, on internet in general, in terms of content, is important. The element of trust, which is key in the new version of NRI, is critically important and has been well developed in Southern Africa. As Dr. Songwe mentioned, the fact that digital ID is such a critical element to foster digital transformation in Africa will require better trust mechanisms. And we have good examples coming from that part of the continent. And last but not least, in Western Africa, we see very strong components in both regulation, as mentioned before, and also in terms of impact, which is very encouraging vis-a-vis younger generation in particular. And the areas where much improvement can be expected in the future relate to how ICT strategies have been related to the pursuit of SDGs. So again, being aware of the high level of presence of various African countries in this panel, I will stop here because the knowledge is much more on their side than on mine. But I hope that this can help our discussion. Let me move to the last part of this presentation, what we mean by digital transformation and what the key messages are that emerge from this year's report and how they could apply to Africa. So in parallel with the report and the analysis, we have carried out over the last 6 months a series of interviews with high-level decision makers, leaders, and analysts working on digital transformation. We had the privilege of benefiting from the time of Dr. Songwe, as well as Vint Cerf, one of the initiator of the internet, and these are only 2 of the very powerful quotes that we have recorded. So I would encourage all of you and those attending this event to go to the Portulan website and hear more from the people who are really making digital transformation on the ground. The questions we focused on in the report can be summarized in the following way. Number 1, we granted a lot of importance to how digital transformation was impacting global inequality. We chose that question before COVID struck. And of course, it's a question that is becoming even more important in view of the impact of COVID. The second question we ask is that, is digital transformation leading to better lives? And we've seen a lot of focus on the technical dimension of digital transformation and too little, in our view, about how it does improve the lives of people on the ground, including those who may not have access to internet and to networks generally. And last but not least, a policy and strategic question is about control. Are we controlling technology, or is technology controlling us? And with the development of artificial intelligence and a number of technologies around face recognition, big data, these are questions that are becoming increasingly important in terms of the sustainability and social acceptability of digital transformation. And all of that boils down to how can we better combine human aspects and technology aspects under the right kind of governance umbrella. And the key messages that emerge from this year's report, and I will not get into that, but we may discuss them in the upcoming discussion. Number 1, as mentioned before, using the example of Sweden, digital transformation to be successful needs to be system-wide. If efforts and investment focus only on one pillar or one sub-pillar, it may be wasted money, because there will be elements that will bring you down and not allow you to leverage the full return on your investment. Second message, digital transformation is creating new form of digital divides. The ways we used to measure digital divide was about infrastructure. It was about availability of information access in hospitals, in governments, in schools. We see now other forms of divide that have to do with content, with control, with value chains that we need to better measure and assess. Third, trust and security are becoming critical to successful digital transformation. And the example taken by Dr. Songwe earlier about digital ID and the possibility to make illiterate people bankable by using other kinds of ID than just typing words on the keyboard are critically important. Number 4, COVID has accelerated all of that. And digital transformation used to be a priority before COVID. Now it has moved to being an imperative. And we need to be very, very careful in ways in which the risks associated to that should be mitigated. 5, education and reskilling are critically important. One of the challenges facing Africa is how to make full use of one of its fundamental wealth, which is its youth, its demography. Allowing younger generation to acquire the education and the skills that they will need to be champions in the digital economy and to help with the digital transformation of Africa is at the core of what we should do. Number 6, digital transformation can help the accelerated implementation of SDGs. This is a critical element for the UN system as a whole, but much more for the UN than the UN system, it is a challenge and an opportunity for the world as a whole. Digital transformation can be applied to every single objective, goal, and target of the SDGs. The ITU in particular is working very hard at providing the elements that will enable us to measure efforts along those lines. And last but not least, global cooperation has been heavily damaged over the last few years. Multilateralism needs to be rebuilt. Digital transformation can help us do that by enhancing possibilities of further cooperation between universities, between businesses, between governments. We should not let that opportunity go. And let me just conclude with one word of optimism. Africa has many, many good cards in her hands. One of them is its demography. Another one is the high degree of entrepreneurship that exists across Africa. Digital transformation can be helped, can be built on that basis, and it can help the African continent take even more and better advantages of this wealth for the future. Thank you very much for your attention. And again, I remain available for any question about what I said or what I was very careful not to say.
Thank you.
Oliver, sorry, I'm disrupting you, but I'm about to leave. But you know, Bruno, thank you so much for this presentation, but you ended by saying the African continent, and your index does not talk about the African continent. We have to stop it. You have to have the African continent. When I look at your index, if I was from Morocco, I don't show up. And you know, a lot of what is happening today in Tunisia is particularly important for what's going on in Togo or Ghana or other places. So we do need to stop having this African continent split in different ways. We have to have it as one continent. And so my ask to you is the next time we do this presentation, maybe we can actually include the rest of our continent into it. Otherwise, it's not an Africa continent presentation. So I will ask that maybe if your team can help us to redo this and include North Africa in the presentation, so that when we send it out to our ministers and our, you know, everybody who is interested in this conversation, they actually do see the full breadth of what the African continent is looking like. But otherwise, I think all the messages are you know, spot on, and I thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sangwe. Point taken, I promise.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, yes, for raising that very, very important point. And that I think we need to we'll take care of that in the next presentation. But Bruno, thank you so much for the presentation. I think you raised some issues there, but also it was critical for you to point out that the potential that Africa has in this area. I think if we have an inclusive presentation that includes the North to say it is a complete Africa, perhaps the picture is going to be slightly different. So we'll now switch gear and go to the panelists. To give a reflection on what has been presented. And also, I have a very specific question that I'm going to be asking. I will ask Joseph if we do have interpretation. If we don't, I'll be asking the French speakers that are here, perhaps to speak in French. I understand we do have French, we do have an English interpretation, so that would be good. So I will start with Your Excellence, Toure, Minister of Digital Economy, and also former Undersecretary in the UN. As we've just heard, the 2020 edition of the Network Readiness Index report calls the attention on a possible growing gap between Africa and other regions of the world in terms of digital transformation. Given your past experience as Secretary General of the International Telecommunications Union, what policy changes do we need to bring about to accelerate digital transformation in Africa? I'll give you 3 minutes. We're sort of running out of time. If you could just respond in 3 minutes, Honorable Minister. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oliver, and hello to Vera and Bruno, and all of you, Sina, and everybody else. I'm actually working from home today because we had the last night at 8 p.m. a warning. One of our colleagues who's hospitalized has not been diagnosed yet for COVID, but we've taken the extreme measure of having everyone to work from home and be teleworking while all staff is being tested. So before the result of the test, I got the permission from Prime Minister that we will be able to telework. So here we are, able to, in just a few hours, take a decision for, doing this type of things, which mean that there is some preparation and preparedness for the COVID, which we have here. I've been minister just 2 months now, and lucky, happy to be joining the club. And I have made an assessment over the past 2 months to see what is missing. And indeed, there is a regulation. It simply may not be being implemented very well. So, and it's general in Africa, we may have a regulation, but implementation that's where we may have a problem. Second, the ecosystem is there. I have found that there is only a need of putting a spin into the system, something that will trigger it. And that's exactly what I'm going to do now. I have my report ready for Prime Minister to kick off on a few assessments and few recommendations that I'm making here. My goal is to put Mali among the top 10 in Africa by the end of the transition in 18 months. And I certainly believe that there is enough here in the ecosystem and in infrastructure that we can play on so that we can move it forward. When we are assessing our system, you look at 3 main indicators: coverage, quality of service, and cost. And also you look at 3 other factors that are very important, which is usage, applications, and content development. Those are things that you will see that will help us trigger the system. And I can say that we have a number of ministers in our cabinet who are converted people who believe that ICT will be the key for their development. That's the Minister of Agriculture, and I believe that will be a very key thing for us. Minister of Education. By the way, the Minister of Education was my classmate back in the 70s. So we are lucky to be working together. And from the very first week, we had work on how exams could be done in the country without anybody cheating. And ICT has made a big difference. And for the first time this year, the results were not contested. And the Ministry of Health is also one key ministry which wants to really use ICT as a real booster in the country. We have a very large country, 1.2 million square kilometers. And the last one is the Ministry of Industry. And we hope to, another former classmate of mine, so that we were trying to work together to make sure there is a industry attracted here. There have been a lot of commitment for investment already. Close to $300 million were signed just in the past month. And also our Universal Access Fund is really probably one of the biggest funds in Africa, which has not been used as much. And therefore, we have really room here to move forward here and solve our problem without even asking for external funding. And that's very important here. We may be moving without asking external funding. external fund will come only if private sector comes in and invests with us. That we will accept. The government will not need any funding in this overall system. I have already acquired 150 acres of land just 2 weeks ago for a cyber park that we intend to put in place. And also I'm creating what I call the Broadband Council here in the image of the Broadband Commission, which I created when I was in ITU, which I believe will be a framework to bring private sector and government together to decide on the things to do. Just last weekend, I was visiting a university where these young girls and young boys.
Minister, you may want to sort of wrap up so that we have the other ministers also coming in.
Okay, I'll come back to that one later on in the thing during the debates, because I was planning to leave after an hour, but because of a meeting. But because of the COVID alarm that we have here, I'm going to stay for the time. So I'll have time to talk about again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for those insights. 2 months in the job, you seem to have been doing quite a lot already. So that indicates the commitment the government of Mali has on transformation. Now, I'll go back, on the issues that were raised by the Executive Secretary about Togo, and also even in the presentation by Bruno. So I'm talking to Her Excellency Sina Lawson, the Minister of Digital Economy and Telecommunication, who is also the board chair for ECA Center of Excellence on Digitization. Honorable Lawson, Togo is not covered, as we saw from the presentation on Network Readiness Index, and also it was also mentioned by the Executive Secretary this year. But it is among African countries that have made really significant progress in leveraging digital economy for economic development. It's understood Togo has already or is able to quickly distribute emergency financial support to 500,000 people in less than 2 weeks using mobile phones. In your view, how has COVID-19 impacted the need for digital transformation, and how African countries can develop a post-COVID harmonized strategy for technology intervention? Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, Togo is not covered in the report, but I think that it's important that I speak today because of my presence. I'm sure that in 2021 Togo will be covered, so that's a good thing. And it's also true that it's important, and it's not actually the fault of the report. It's really, one has to take responsibility. It's our fault as a country that we weren't able to provide good enough statistics so that we would be included in these reports. And so I'm going to talk with the regulator to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen in the future. It's true that when COVID, in the COVID response, digital was at the heart of our COVID response, both in terms of gathering data, in terms of our testing strategies, and of course in the cash transfer program that we were able to implement very quickly. So COVID was a curse and a blessing for the digital world, because some of the projects that would have taken, I don't even want to say years, I want to say decades to happen, happened in few days, few weeks, because we didn't have the choice. And so to give you a few examples, number one, there is this cash transfer program, Novisi. When the president decided that we had to implement social and physical distancing measures, one of his key concerns was the informal sector. And so we had to come up very quickly with a way to support the informal sectors, because they were going to be the ones hugely impacted by our curfews and closings of some cities. And the team was able to to build a USSD platform and to provide these populations with cash transfer in less than 2 weeks. And it's an all digital cash transfer program, fully traceable, that we were able to do. We interfaced this platform with the biometric ID database that we had, which right now is the voters ID, but next year, hopefully with the support of the World Bank, we're rolling out a biometric ID for the entire population. So we'll change the database to put the new EID database. So we were able to do this very quickly. And for us, it was a win, because from now on, the decision that the government has taken is that from now on, all our social protection programs will go fully digital. So that's very, very important in terms of cash transfer, in terms of G2P and the consequences that it will have for G2P payments. But it's not only, cash transfer, it's also what Vera mentioned, borders entry. Now, when you go through the airport of Lomé, before coming to Togo, you have to fill an online form and pay for your test. You come and you'll get tested at the airport. You receive the result of your test within 24 hours. What we ask people is to stay. We ask people to stay at home while waiting for the result. And when you come to the airport, you have to download a contact tracing app. So we were able to implement online forms, contact tracing app, to dematerialize all the testing procedures in a couple of months, really, or even less. And so we were also able to do that because we had a team of very motivated people, very young people, very motivated. We didn't have a choice, but what we also have to say is that our legal framework is also there in terms of when you have to implement, let's say, contact tracing. A lot of people are worried about what their data is going to be used for. So you need to have data protection and cyber security laws in place. And so we were able to really have all this in place. Of course, the data protection law and the cybersecurity laws were adopted earlier, but I think that because of this crisis, because of the use of data, because of the understanding by the general population that, hey, now it's all about data, it's all about gathering information, it was important that all this be in place at the same time. What else? I think that so for us, COVID acted as a way to demonstrate the importance of digital. In the new roadmap of Togo, the new government roadmap 2020 to 2025, the digitization of Togo is really at the heart of our government's policy for the 5 years to come. So in every sector now, we have at least one digitization project. And so it's really important because it took years to reach that point. And I think that it's because of COVID and because of the, like you said, digitizing is now an imperative. It's really because of COVID that we came to this point so quickly. And it also raises questions in terms of education. It's true that when we had to close the schools, one question was how do you keep educating your children while schools are closed? And for us as a country, the digital divide, what you see right now between the capital city or cities and rural areas was really an issue because we so far were not able to provide people in rural areas with appropriate education. And right now, what we're doing with the Ministry of Education is to really think through these issues, not only in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of content, relevant content, education content. And our concern is really to make sure that we build a model that is sustainable. So we have to find ways to build models that don't rely 100% on the state budget to execute upon these public policy objectives.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. I think that's again very useful to hear a lot of work that you're doing in Togo, and I think maybe in the next round of questions, or maybe at the roundup, you probably want to touch on some of the critical things that are happening there. I'll go to the Member of Parliament in Gambia, Honorable Haugibo, to also tell us in his own reflection, but also on the very specific question I have. So, Honorable Minister, the Member of Parliament, rather, the COVID pandemic has made it clear the internet is more critical than ever in keeping up basic economic processes, social interaction, and a minimum of cultural life. These prioritizes having meaningful access for all people, good digital policies, and internet governance, as well as trust in public officials and information. In these people-centered processes, that parliaments must be guided by public trust, both in themselves as legislators and in the internet itself. What should the Gambia do to foster innovation, skills building, entrepreneurship, and leveraging the internet for economic development?
Yes, thank you very much, Honorable, and thank you very much, Honorable Minister, and everybody that's on this call today. I think this is really a very important question, and I think this is not only for the Gambia, but I think at the level of the African continent, really this is something we really need to look at. Now, in terms of the Gambia, I think what we are trying to do as a government is to leverage on the COVID experience, because what happened in the Gambia here, the schools were shut down, non-essential business were shut down for several months. Now, we developed a national broadband network last year that actually, if you know the Gambia itself, is divided into two. You have the northern part and the southern part. That's where you have the River Gambia that cuts across. Now, the national broadband network last year in 2019, the government was able to run the fiber optic from one end of the country to the other end. In fact, some analysts actually have said the Gambia is really, right now, is one of the most connected. But what happened is the fiber is there, but then the services that come on the fiber, that's actually what is lacking. Now, you can go to an area, like my area where I came from, there is fiber optic, there's internet, but then there is no electricity, for example. Now, what I think the government needs to do immediately is to leverage on this network expansion that was done by the government through, an act of parliament in terms of, authorizing for that loan to build that particular network. Now, with immediate effect, I think they need to really leverage on that particular network, not open it up for the private sector. But right now, as we speak, it's only the government network that's actually running on that broadband network, and it's not really well open to the private sector. Now, what happened is the private sector also, the ISP company, they're going to build in masks all over the country, and that is not cost effective. Now, just to be on this call, maybe perhaps by the end of this call, it may cost me actually $20 just to be on this kind of call. Now, imagine if the private sector was able to use that broadband network that is available in terms of the fiber optic, that's going to actually help them to reduce their cost of operations. And when your cost of operations is reduced, also the overall cost of the internet can also be reduced. So I think immediately the government needs to open up to ensure that the private sector actually has access to the national broadband network, where they will also help to reduce the cost of their cost of operations. Now, the other area I think is on the education sector. When you look at the education policy of the Gambia in terms of the basic and secondary education, they had a policy that would actually allow them to reduce the contact hours. What that means is they want to leverage on TV, they want to leverage on the radio, and they also want to leverage on the internet to be able to conduct classes away from the classroom. Now, COVID actually has, in fact, accelerated that. That's why in the first 3 months in the Gambia, the ministry was conducting classes on TV and on the radio. And I think this is something that the country needs to take it further to ensure that those in the regions without electricity or without internet access are able to have radios, are able to have TV to be able to have classes. Because again, when you look at the education sector in the Gambia, I think it's developing, but there's a lot of people that are actually left behind. One, because of the country doesn't have internet across the country, the electricity also is an issue. But I think with radio and television, I think in some quarters, it can actually also help. Now, I also think there's a need for the Gambia itself. In most high schools, especially government high schools, there are no computer labs in the Gambia. Most of the high schools do not have one. So I think there's a need to overhaul the curriculum of the schools to ensure that the students actually have computer labs. Now, there's a project that is about to start where the government intends to solarize all the schools, all the hospitals in the country. So when that is done, which means there's electricity, I think then the next step is to bring the infrastructure in terms of computer labs, in terms of internet access, so that the students can be taught the usage of computers. But the most fundamental thing is the curriculum of the schools, high schools and the basic secondary schools must be changed to go ahead with what is actually with digital transformation. And to do that, the government needs to change its curriculum. And lastly, Honorable Changana, is the digital transformation in the Gambia is no longer a luxury. You know, there was a time when only the private sector and the rich people would have access to the internet, but now it's no longer a luxury. Now it's a need. Because recently, the government was issuing out food to the poor and then doing cash transfers to the poor. But the biggest problem they had was a database that's going to show exactly who is where and who are you. So it took them a lot of months to be able to come up with something. And I think this digital transformation, the COVID actually has accelerated it. And I think the government of the Gambia needs to use that as a tool or as a springboard to start using the digital transformation to ensure that they know every person, where you are, your social status, in case they need to do anything in terms of social services, they'll be able to track you and they'll be able to know exactly where you are in every part of the Gambia.
Thank you very, very much. You know, the emphasis on changing the curriculum for, you know, the educational system is critical to ensure that there's digital literacy in the country. Well, I'll move on to Ghana, the chairperson of Ghana.com, Mr. Nico Kwena. I have a question for you. You know, give some reflection on what has been presented, but also a very specific question to yourself. Despite the significant progress in Africa's digital infrastructure, the fourth industrial revolution is yet to be accelerated in the continent. Artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, the 3D printing, genetic engineering are yet to be developed in the continent. In your view, what needs to be done to have these technologies universally available for the African communities?
Thank you very much, and my greetings to everyone. These technologies will eventually become universally available in African communities. They will. But with what level of involvement of Africa may be a question. And how sustainably, that's another question. In my opinion, COVID has done what the pioneers, technology pioneers, including the internet, failed to communicate to policy authority. Digital transformation has now been welcomed as a national priority, and I think that is good. Perhaps Africa has made progress in digital transformation coming out of a digital divide, but perhaps not significant. We cannot expect our students to do e-learning on our typical 4G mobile networks. The National Research and Education Networks, NRENs, and research labs are still being put in place with only nominal contributions from countries. There is some success in access, but we are yet to create the foundations to solve these technical types of problems sustainably. We still have some way to go. If we respond well to the new technologies, we will participate in both supply and consumption of technologies. And if we don't, we face not only more digital divide, but more challenging divides, knowledge, intelligence, and perhaps digital money. Our participation will be reduced to largely consumption, not to supply of technology artifacts. Let's say we start by valuing the digital assets we have and treating them as critical for our survival as a region. We are experiencing how internet in Africa has scaled to support social distancing during COVID. Africa should therefore be removing all barriers, impedances, and obstacles in the way of adopting technologies. Hopefully, no more shutdowns to internet and reduced taxes on technology, as we should be subsidizing them to enhance our economies. These technologies have applications in many domains, making education an essential piece of becoming universally available in Africa in a sustainable way. The technologies are outcomes of computer science and biotechnology fields. Do we really think Africa is well positioned for these yet? They offer new intelligences to solve problems. One cannot engage these fields properly without institutional strength to support knowledge. There are many opportunities for domain of applications, and we have to acquire the domain knowledge in addition to technology know-how. When the technology becomes more widely adopted, there's a need for much more interdisciplinary discussions on policy, law, economics, consumer impact, and so forth, all requiring more education. Attempt to cut corners can result in the industry degrading into tools users, not developers of tools. In essence, we become advanced users and may inherit the difficulty of independently extending tools, not because they are not open source, but because we lack educational capacities to do that. Let's solve local problems first. Build infrastructure and services with that in mind. Policy authorities should stop saying no at first sight to new technologies. Recall that we initially said no to the internet. In fact, many companies were shut down. And we are now doing it again with cryptocurrencies, where we can miss an opportunity of programmability of money wave. Finally, let's say we pay attention to cultural heritage and preservation and do more things uniquely African. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, a good reflection there. I'll go straight to our next panelist on that is Dr. Rebecca Deutsch, the Chief Executive Officer for the application text, but also she's also a member of the board for the ECA Digital Center of Excellence. Rebecca, my question is, the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the importance of innovation and emerging technologies to address its impact. Africa is the net consumer of hardware and software, including applications developed outside the continent. From a private sector perspective, what would be the strategy and policies to be adopted to reverse the situation?
I think my response to that would be, let's use our own technology, starting with the government. We have a number of government officials that are connected today and have spoken about the policies within their countries. But I think that beyond those policies, it's really important to buy locally. Buy the technology and use the technology that your own entrepreneurs are creating. Because I think that when you start using that technology, you start to see the types of constraints that maybe African entrepreneurs might face versus using technology from overseas. I think the Honorable MP from Gambia said it very well. At the end of this call, he might have spent $20 just to be connected here. Whereas there are conferencing technologies that use a lot less bandwidth, that are created locally. Why not try to encourage some of those entrepreneurs by starting to use these platforms that aren't developed in countries where data is unlimited? I recently tweeted about the fact that the use of data is a problem. A Zoom call or a Zoom conference will consume between 540 megabytes to 1.65 gigabytes of data for 1 hour. And when you consider that the average cost, the median cost, I should correct, the median cost of internet access in Africa is $7 per gigabyte, you understand that this is one of those constraints that the Network Readiness report is not even addressing, because their network readiness is taking context that is very a context that's very Western and trying to apply it to our area. And so I really hope that for the next year's report, there's a lot more work in collaboration with actual local Africans in developing the report. And we'll see that maybe some of the indexes might be a little bit different. We talked about Rwanda as being, kind of a success story, but one of the challenges, a pure example, is one of the challenges is in implementation, as the Honorable Minister from Mali explained, that it's not just the policies, but the implementation of those policies. For instance, we have a startup that has developed a USSD-based training and mentoring and educational platform that's used in multiple countries, Kenya, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire, and recently expanded into Rwanda, and faced a new constraint where students, before they're able to connect to the platform, have to have an ID. And even though this is USSD technology, so you don't need the internet, they wanted to create a platform on the internet for the students to get their ID to be able to connect to a USSD platform, which completely, goes against the purpose of this very easy to use platform. And so I think that really including entrepreneurs, including the creators of the technology in the conversation, both at the policymaker, at start when the policymakers are making their decisions, and beyond when, for instance, this network readiness report is created, really talking to implementers, people that are on the ground, is very, very significant. One of the things is that, that 28 under 30% connectivity rate for Africa. I think that if the preparers of the content had spent a little bit more time on the continent, they would see that it's not a one-to-one. It's not one connection and one person. And so a lot more people get connected behind one connection than you would see in the Western world. So I think some of those things will come to light a little bit better when there's a little bit more time spent with those that are actually executing on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Again, the insight from the private sector there. We have one more panelist. This is the Chief Executive Officer for Hello Hub on Kenya. Madam Magdalene Chepkemoi, I have a question for you, and the question is, according to the report that was presented by Bruno, and I hope that you had an opportunity to also read the report itself. Technology adaptation, people, governance, and impact. Kenya is one of the top 3 African countries. In terms of governance, could you elaborate how Kenya succeeded? Which policies or regulations do you recommend so far so that other African countries can actually follow the example of Kenya?
Thank you. Thank you, Oliver, for the question. And indeed, the ICT sector in Kenya is vibrant. It's because of the favorable government policy, infrastructure, and vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem. And all this has made Kenya among leaders in the digital economy in Africa. Digital platforms are expanding in Kenya, and many Kenyans are currently engaging in digitally enabled work like online work, buying and selling online, taxi drivers, and others. And all this would not have been possible without the growth in technology and the support from the government. And as you all know that we cannot talk about innovation and technology in Kenya without mentioning M-Pesa, which has been referred in this meeting. You will see M-Pesa around Kenya from rural areas, peri-urban centers, and even urban centers. This is the main mobile money transfer platform in Kenya, and it has grown to 41.5 million users in 2020. And all this, we cannot underestimate the role the government played. When M-Pesa was being launched, I remember way back in 2007, the Kenya Bankers Association was strongly against it. And look how M-Pesa has been successful. Banking institutions are currently using it through mobile banking. Transfer of money both locally and internationally. I can get money from PayPal to my phone. And all these success stories, financial technology has been a major force driving change in Kenya, with mobile money platforms revolutionizing financial access, improving financial inclusion, And in turn, it has served as a catalyst for innovation in other sectors, such as e-commerce, agriculture, healthcare, and infrastructure. And talking of e-commerce, e-commerce is vibrant in Kenya, and it's vibrant. Kenya has a vibrant ecosystem, e-commerce ecosystem in Africa, and it is growing day in, day out, especially among small and medium businesses. We have some of the famous stores in Kenya include Kwetu, Twiga Foods, Kilimon, and all the others. And as you know that, for e-commerce, it has 3 elements. That's the financial flow, and that means we need a website, we need a mobile application to be able to connect buyers and sellers. Secondly, we need financial flow. And all this has been brought about by M-Pesa, the mobile transfer in Kenya. And lastly, like Dr. Vera mentioned it, logistics. That means a seller should be able to deliver this food physically to the buyers. So how did Kenya do it? So there's some few points which I'm going to mention here on how Kenya was able to be successful. First, Kenyan government invested in technology infrastructure like fiber, which ensured the internet is accessible and fast across the country, and the internet in Kenya is very affordable. I've heard Rebecca mentioning about $7, but in Kenya, 1 gigabyte in Kenya is $1, which compared to other countries in Africa, which one gigabyte can go up to $75. Mobile penetration in Kenya is over 80%, and it has created platforms for innovation and reaching the mass markets. Secondly, the government has been able to successfully digitize all its services, and government services are now accessible online, anytime, anywhere, and on any device. Government has been able to digitize, business registration, iTax, applying for passport, and it has created centers across the country, which is called Huduma centers. And all these centers enables Kenyans to go and access the services in those centers. And this center also ensures that those who do not know how to use the platform can go and get help at the centers for free. So government is constantly improving also the ease of doing business. For example, 7 years ago in Kenya, Kenya was ranked globally, Kenya had global ranking of 170, but today we are at 57. And some of the measures which Kenyan government put in place is digitization of the business registration process, which currently takes around 2 weeks, easing of taxation, faster dispute resolution, that is efficient judicial system. And I think also lastly, one thing which has made us very successful is also the funding. There is a steady flow of foreign direct investment, private equity into the tech startup ecosystem in Kenya. And currently Kenya is ranked 3rd in Africa in terms of tech startup investment. On policies, there are different policies which Kenya have been able to adopt and which other African countries can be able to adopt. We have policies like the Data Protection Act.
30 seconds, Magdalene, 30 seconds,
okay.
If you can. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. So we have all these policies which Kenya have been able to adopt, including the National Blockchain and Artificial Intelligence Task Force. And also the recent startup bill, which is enabling innovation in Kenya and creating very entrepreneurial ecosystem. With all these policies, I think we can accelerate and foster the growth of digital economy in Africa. But I have to mention this, if I have some few seconds, that digital businesses can be a force for sustainable development in Africa. And imagine that if I, from Kenya, can be able to order a product in Nigeria and have it delivered to me in Kenya, maybe within 2 days. If we take the customer-centric approach in Africa, we are going to grow our digital economy. Thank you for listening to me, and back to you, Oliver.
Thank you very much. Indeed, Kenya is an example. We have almost run out of time, but I want to give the panelists perhaps a minute and a half and just bear, with me, those that are connected, just to listen on the, final words on the conclusion. And I'll start with Her Excellency, Madam Lawson, the Minister of Digital and Technology in telecommunication, rather, in Togo. Any last words, Honorable Minister Lawson?
Yes, I have a few last words. I think, first of all, that it was a very interesting panel. And looking into the future, what I think is really critical for us countries is to ensure that we can identify all our citizens. We need to make sure that we roll out biometric ID, and that serves as the foundation for not only policies within our countries, but foundation to the modernization of how Africa should be functioning as one continent. It's true that from the outside world, looking to Africa, they always talk about the continent, and from within inside Africa, we do know that we operate as individual countries, and that we have to make a particular special effort into increasing, the harmonization of our policies, of our regulations, the interoperability of our IT systems, and to make sure that what we're building in terms of digital transformation is not only something that makes sense for our nations, but also for the continent, to make sure that it's one.
Thank you very much for that reflection. Mr. Bo, in Gambia, a minute, please, just your reflection, even less, if you can.
Yes, thank you very much, Oliver. I think for me, there's a big difference between the availability of the infrastructure and also the usage of the infrastructure. You see, we may have everything like we have in the Gambia right now, where the entire country is connected on fiber, but the usage, where people can make a difference in terms of transformation, is a fundamental thing that we have to take care of. And to do that, we must build from the younger generation. Let's change the curriculum that we actually have in Africa here. And it doesn't only mean IT, but in other areas. Let's see how can digital transformation actually affect our lives and the lives of the African people. And to do that, the younger generation must be in place, and the curriculum that we have in Africa here must also change. That will lead us to a very solid foundation in terms of economic development. And lastly, if I may say, just like we have the Africa Free Trade Area, I think there's a need also to have the same thing online. We need to collaborate as an African continent. We need to be able to talk e-business, just like the other lady was talking about a few minutes ago. We need to be able to move transactions from one part of Africa to the other. Transportation is a problem, but online e-business also maybe can bring a solution to all those issues in the continent of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I turn to Rebecca? Any thoughts, your reflection, last words, Rebecca? Thank you. Have we lost Rebecca? Okay. I'll go to Ghana. Nee, please, any reflection? 30 seconds, please, your reflections. You are muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Am I okay?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, I think we've been discussing technology adoption for the past 3 decades. In my opinion, education and research are at the root of these technologies. We cannot, bypass it. I mean, things like the hubs and the centers and the parks and so forth need the institutional capacity of education and research institutions in order to function. The workforce there will be too light without that. Many of our computer science departments, and for that matter, other biotechnology research institutions, have not been catered for. They have not been supported. Okay, they are too small, too young, don't have enough international stature participation for them to make any major breakthroughs. And if we don't fix that, in my opinion, we'll be constantly addressing our inability to contribute on the supply side.
Thank you. Magdalene, 30 seconds, your thoughts.
Thank you again, Oliver, and everyone. I would just want to echo what has been said by other panelists, that we need to be one in terms of Africa, to collaborate, to learn from each other, as well as also learn from other economies like China, which is currently in the digital economy. So, I believe that we can leverage on e-commerce, like just the way Alibaba has been able to be successful, to transform Africa. You know, when Alibaba is talking about delivering goods to the rural areas within some few hours, we need to be talking about delivering goods from South Africa to Kenya within also less than a week or two weeks, so that we can trade amongst ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last, I'm going to ask the Minister Toure from Mali. Please, in 45 seconds, your thoughts, please.
Thank you. You've been generous in giving me 45 seconds. You know, I share the optimism of my colleagues who have spoken before me. Africa is about to have a real takeoff in this thing. What we want to do is to meet the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is a minimum actually. What we need is to create wealth by way of creating jobs for the youth. And the two areas we want to improve is bringing costs down and bringing usage up as well. So I think all the ecosystem is ready. After all this assessment, I was in the policy making before in the United Nations system, came down to Smart Africa for Africa Global Strategy. Now I'm down in the country and I see that the thing is ready to really participate. All it needs is a real spin in the machinery so that things move forward. And we just doing that by sharing experience. And a report like this that we are seeing today gives us another boost to try and challenge ourselves and do better. So I would like to thank Bruno Lanvin and all his team for preparing this report and giving us a chance to again see what is missing in our industry and what we can do together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, really for those last minute thoughts. And I'm going to ask Bruno. We are getting to a close of, actually we've gone past the time that was allocated, to just give his closing remarks. In the meantime, I'm asking everyone to put your cameras on so that our team could take a photo. And also I'm asking those that are connected, please, to send the questions. We have not been, really been just in terms of responding to some of the issues on the chat. Please send them to us. We'll be able to respond to those questions. We'll pick some of them from the chat, but if we have other questions, we'll be able to respond if you could send them by email. Bruno, please. There were issues that were raised by the executive secretary that have also been repeated by others, and also even by the minister. If you may want to react and give your closing remarks on the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oliver. And very quickly, because we have gone beyond our time, and looking forward to pursuing this conversation. So 3 points. Number one, a big thank you for UNECA, to Dr. Sangwe for this event, and a big thank to all panelists and those who participated. I think this was exactly the kind of conversation we were looking forward to, and we've not been disappointed. Point number two, we've taken good notes of the constructive points made by the panelists and by Dr. Sangwe. Number one, very important for us, pursuing our efforts to work on Africa as a continent. I think this has been underlined by many of the panelists, if not all. What Africa needs in handling its own digital transformation is very often critical mass. Critical mass to attract investment, critical mass to foster cooperation, education at the continent level. And we want to pursue our efforts to indeed bring our own little brick to that edifice by providing fact-based evidence about Africa as one single continent. Second one, nothing replaces experience on the ground. We can do all the reports we want. We can accumulate all the data. If we don't have the direct feedback and support from people who are doing digital transformation on the ground, physically, whether they are private actors, public actors, students, academics, we will miss our target. So my own work in Africa, whether it has been in Cape Verde, in Burkina, in Senegal, in South Africa, in other parts of the continent, have shown me how much value this generates. You come with an idea, you get feedback, and you leave the continent much richer than you had been before. So we want to continue with our Portulans, our efforts to work with individual countries, with UNECA, with regional endeavors, and follow closely and reflect these efforts and success as much as we can do in the report in its future edition. And the third point, coming back to my pet subject, we are looking at future readiness. It's not just network readiness. It is future readiness that needs to be built worldwide. And if we talk about the future, we talk about younger generation. So clearly, as many panelists mentioned, education, skilling are at the core of what we need to do. And anything we can do to engage younger generation by showing that we understand their concerns and we provide them tools to make the future a better future will be going along the lines of what we want to do. So a big thank you for everybody. And I look forward to pursuing this discussion at all kinds of appropriate levels.
Thank you so much, Bruno. I know we've gone past the time that was allocated, but just a big thank you to the panelists really for taking their time and going beyond what was allocated, for sharing their very rich, insightful information about digital transformation. And I think there's a consensus that this is something that we need to push going forward, and that the next report should be much more inclusive to include other countries, even those that there are others that are actually doing very well, like we've just heard from the Minister, Sina from Togo, that I think they're doing a lot of work, and that needs to be included in the report. So many thanks to everyone, and those that are also connected for being with us. We've got quite a record number of people that have been part of on this chat. As I said, please do send the questions or the email that on the invite that you received, and we'll be able to respond to the questions. So thank you so much, and have a good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Thank you.